welcome back to Artist Life Podcast. Again, going solo this week. However, I do have some promising leads on guests for next week. I say promising leads because I don't have any confirmation yet. I'm trying to line things up in advance so that I can not have what happened to me last time and just kind of have things lined up, or what happened to me this time. Because since last week, I just decided to rock this one solo again, mostly because I just wasn't in the mood to start doing research and figuring out, who is someone that I could have a conversation with, what would that conversation be, and then trying to reach out and go from there. I do want to maybe branch out a bit and maybe go further than local. I really wanted to stick local, and because of recent events, I feel like maybe I'll want to branch out, figure out some Skype stuff, and just talk to some other people, because I have access to other people that, I know from Saskatchewan, even people in BC. There's just some other folks that I could talk to, and there's obviously, I think there's a wealth of people right in Lethbridge, but I feel like at this point, maybe trying to reach out to some other folks that I already have connections with beyond Lethbridge might be worth my while. With that, I'm going to get into the quick thoughts for today, and that's kind of more about just balancing stuff. I've been thinking about it just the past little while. I've been in the studio today because of family life being a really new thing for me, and I feel like I'm in the door with family life a lot. My partner and I don't live together, and my partner has children, but I'm there about 5 days a week, if not more. So I'm there quite a lot, and until we live together, I feel like balancing stuff is going to be a little harder. This is something I've been talking about on my personal vlogs and conversations and stuff more and more often. But as I got to the studio today, I got here really late today, and it was purely because I didn't want to leave the house. But, in the past, as I was reflecting, I was in the past, there were times where I'm man, I want to get out the door on a Sunday morning so I can spend, a pretty good chunk of the day in the studio, whether it be doing the podcast, creating some art, doing some reading, whatever, that I just wanted some studio time, some art time, definitely a big chunk of time for me to do some creating of pieces, because that might be the only chance in a week that I get, depending on how much I'm working, and that was kind of the routine. But, in the past, I'd left late, and not necessarily because I wanted to leave late, and I'd been kind of oh man, I really wanted to get out of there, and I'd been kind of choked about it. Whereas this week was the first time where I was I could have left earlier, but I chose not to. And then when I got here so late, I really felt or even before I got here, I was man, I was in the house too long today. I should have left earlier, just for my own sake. And we talked a little bit before about art as a cathartic process, and it's more of just balancing this family life with my own needs as an individual. And I think that it'll get easier once we all live together. I think that'll be way easier to balance, because I can maybe, and what I was thinking of today, and why I'm bringing this up, is my needs as an individual have so much to do with art, with either, reading is such a big thing for me, but I find so much inspiration, artistic inspiration from reading novels and short stories, magazines, I'm reading art magazines or music magazines, or, poets and writers, or the New Yorker, or whatever, and then I'm reading a lot of fiction and stuff as well, that inspires me by giving me new ideas for artwork, or just giving me things to think about, So, and reading is just, that's just part of, it's just, I don't know what to call it, a hobby, a pastime, a way to ease my anxiety, a source of entertainment. Reading is just a thing that I need to make time for more, and I've been successful in going back to reading more than I was a couple of years ago, or when I was in university. Definitely in the past year, especially, I've really come back to it, and I'm, just as in love with it as I was when I was a teenager. But yeah, reading was just an example. I need time to create, because I also need time to write, and I'm not doing that very much, and that's a source of creation somewhat. It's a time, it's a time for reflection. There's so many things that it's hard for me to balance, and I don't know, everyone's different, whether you're an artist or not, but there's so many different things artistically or creatively that I want to get into, whether it be yes, writing is something I used to do, I would like to do it often. It's kind of in a reflective nature, just some journaling, but then also in a reflective nature that is also more artistic and creative, and I've been doing a little bit of that. There's, working on just getting like together a bunch of my writing so I can do a little publication. Creating visual art, obviously, is a thing that I need to make time for. And I was just thinking today, like, while I was here, man, I might not have a studio in the future, right? I'm so fortunate to have this space. And I was thinking, what if I don't have that later? What am I going to do? Because there was a period of time where I, didn't have space. Well, there's more than one period of time I've never had studio space. This is the first legitimate studio I've ever had. But even, in one of the places, I had an extra bedroom and I had a little studio set up in there. Wasn't perfect, but hey, it worked. And I was just thinking, like, well, if I don't even have that, what am I going to do? Like, I need time to create. I need space to create. And I was like, well, maybe I end up starting to work on smaller things again. But I was just thinking, like, my partner and I have this thing about 60 minutes that she just started. Like, you know what? I just need 60 minutes. Like, I need 60 minutes a day. If I can try to commit myself to that. And it's not, like, 60 minutes of downtime. It's not 60 minutes of, okay, the kids are in bed and I just need time to watch YouTube and just like turn my mind off. It's like, no, I need 60 minutes of something a little more active, something that's a little more feeding of the soul, some writing, some reading, some whatever is going to assist in making you actually feel better. We discussed the time or the need for time to actually tune out too and like turn off and just kind of like whatever, like, I mean, I need to watch a show for a bit or turn on some YouTube or something for a little bit and do that as well. But the 60 minutes thing I was just thinking of today is like, well, maybe that's something I can try to do when I am there for the whole weekend. Like, when she's having her 60 minutes, maybe I need to do some artistic 60 minutes. If I'm not going to get to the studio until Sunday, maybe Friday and Saturday night, other than just reading, maybe I can do like a small sketch. I mean, I'm horrible at drawing, but I mean, like, maybe I can do even just some, like, going back to doing some graffiti stuff in a sketchbook. I've got a sketchbook that I keep there, and I don't use it. I did a couple times because I was trying to do that while the kids were coloring. Then I soon realized that the 3-year-old needs way more attention and can't, focus on one thing for very long before we move on to the next activity. But hey, 60 minutes is enough time for me. I was like, maybe that's something that I can do. So, I don't know, just thinking about, balancing and family life and stuff, and so many times I had read about how artists, full-time artists, mind you, how they balance that. They're like, yeah, just treat it like a full-time job. But with family, it's not as loosey-goosey. Like, I have to go to the studio 9 to 5, or like 8 to 4, or whatever. Like, I have set studio days and times, and I go there Monday to Friday, working hours, 8-hour day, put in a shift, and go home. And some people still do work at home after, whether the kids be in bed or what, but art is not my full-time job, so it makes it more difficult for me to try to find time to do it. And I was thinking, like, I think I do need some structure that is consistent, that I can get something done in a way that balances me. And I still need time to make visual art like a fully realized piece as well, because I won't be able to do that like in an like making a portrait or painting an abstract. That's not something I'm really going to be able to do while I'm there for 60 minutes. Or, I mean, I could, but I don't have paints there. Anyway, that's a whole other logistical issue for not being set up for that there. But it is just something that I need to do. And I need to do it on my own, too. When I'm at home, I need to make time to do some of that. And for me, some of that will be writing. But, I mean, especially on a weekend, it's like, man, I need to do some visual art. I also just need to make sure I actually get here. That despite the fact that in the moment I'm feeling like I want to be somewhere else and really enjoying that time, that I need this. Like, I need to be able to get out for X amount of hours and do some creating. I'm also paying for this space, and I need to use it. But, I mean, it's more of a soul-feeding thing than it is a financial thing. Anyway, those are just my thoughts today. I'm just thinking about balance and life and, like, how I use art as a part of just my personal stuff. I mean, like, exercise could be in there, too, right? Like, biking when the weather allows, or when I, choose that I'm going to do that. Like, that is stuff that I need as well that really helps keep me balanced, keeps the anxiety down. But creating visual art is such a big part of that for me, that I definitely need to refocus on how I balance my life in that area. Moving on from that to the essay. This is something that a friend shared with me It was just like they were sharing someone else's post that had a quote which says, "Making bad art is better than making no art. Go make something." I think this might be seen as nitpicking a little bit, but I did want to just kind of talk about it for a few minutes because him and I just talked about it a little bit, and he was just asking me like, "How do you feel about that?" And I was thinking, well, define bad, right? Like the main thing is like, we need to define our terms here, and that's this short statement, and he called it a blanket statement and stuff too. Like making bad art is better than making no art. Go make something. The go make something kind of clarifies like, hey, you should just be making something. Like it's good to make something versus not making anything. And if we're talking about feeding your soul, we're talking about like, it's good to just get in the process and doing something, then I would kind of agree. Like, yeah, you should be, just do it. Like, just go and just create something and just get into it and just get into the physical process of making something that is better than not doing anything at all. And I think, soon, either next solo episode or whatever, I do want to get into talking about some Chuck Close stuff. His famous quote, or most famous quote, I should say, about inspiration and process and things like that, which I'm not going to get into right now, but I will get into later. I think that is useful, but the whole thing about making bad art is better than making no art, it kind of sounds like you're expecting in advance that you're going to make bad art, and that's where things fall apart for me, and I don't understand. I feel like you can go with the intention to make some art, and you intend to make good art, you intend to do your best. That is what your goal is, to go in there and rock it and be like, hey, I just need to go in there and do something today and feel good by doing it. That doesn't necessarily mean that you go in there with a confidence that you're making a masterpiece that day, but you go there with a positive and optimistic intention to create something good. Like whatever, I'm just using the word good because it's the opposite of bad in my mind. And I wouldn't ever, even if I was experimenting with something brand new, I wouldn't have the intention of like, I'm going to go make something real crappy today. Like that just seems like a weird thing to do. But you would go in with maybe saying like, hey, I don't know how this is going to turn out. I'm going to do my best and see what happens. And like, no matter what, I'm going to get something good out of it, right? Like I'm going to learn from this thing, even if this piece ends up being horrendous. Let's say it ends up being bad as a visual, as a aesthetic piece. In the end, you can call it finished and it's just bad. Then again, why would you call it finished if it was bad? Because you could just keep pushing it and pushing it and pushing it, or force it into another context, by doing something drastic with it and then having the piece be about something else. Like, there's just so many ways. Like, why would you ever call it finished if you're calling it bad? If you're considering the piece to be bad, why would you be okay with that? I think that's kind of where the conversation leads. Because, yeah, making bad art is better than making no art. And, my friend challenged and said, really? Is it, though? Like, define bad, right? Like, I think that you go into your space or whatever, you sit down at a kitchen table, or you go into the studio or your garage or whatever it is, your desk in your bedroom, and you intend to create something. Why would you intend to do something bad? So is bad just the fact that it doesn't look the way you wanted it to look? That it's not something that you can sell? It's not saleable? Like, is it that you wouldn't? What is it that makes it something you're unsatisfied with? I guess that's a word I would use instead. Is I'm unsatisfied with this, and so why is it done? If it's not done, then you didn't make bad art. You were still in the process of making art. Like, I have made art that this is why I use that word unsatisfied, but it's a good thing I did. I have made art that I would say let's say it was a commission, the person that is purchasing it likes it, they think it is good. I am not 100% satisfied, but I am doing the commission for someone else, and I feel like I've put all the energy I want to put into it, because in order to satisfy myself, it will go above and beyond their needs. and I don't want to sacrifice, my state, my emotional and or mental state for the day, because whatever reason it is that I took on the commission, and then I couldn't realize it in the way that I initially wanted, but I know that plan B is perfectly acceptable for them, where they're going to be over the moon about it, but it's just not what I would have wanted to push myself to do. That's not a nice feeling. So if I were to do that, I would say, and I've done it before, I don't like it. So if I were to say that was me making bad art, was that better than making no art? No, that was not. I would have rather have not committed to that thing and then calling it finished before I was satisfied. I don't think that did anything positive for me other than tell me that I didn't like doing it, I don't like the feeling, don't do that again. Like that, I mean, that's the lesson I learned, because I've done it multiple times. I've been like, and it's always a commission, because if it was one of my pieces, like I was saying, you just change the context. This is something I've talked about before, of like, I've been creating a piece and it's not working out, and I'm frustrated, and this is something I used to do way more before than I do now, and I throw it at a wall, or I take a hammer to it, or I light it on fire, or I punch it. Like, it turns in, the context is different. Now the piece is about frustration, and changing that context drastically, completely, it allows new things to happen. I'm not going to keep working at it and working at it and working at it and pushing it in that moment. So I've done it with portraits, I've done it with abstracts, like I've done portraits, I'm like, man, this is not what I wanted to do. And in that moment, I could be like, double down, and I could say, okay, well, I'm just going to start from scratch. I don't really have the patience for that a lot of the time. So usually, I mean, if it's really, really horrible and I just couldn't, I mean, there's a point where I'm like sitting there and I know it's not going well, and I'm like, I'm trying to fix it, and I just run into the mental and emotional energy to continue working on it. So rather than start from scratch, because that seems so daunting to me sometimes, I mean, maybe this is a failing on my part, right? This is me being a bad artist, or just like a bad human who lacks discipline. But more often than not, rather than starting from scratch, because I'm so frustrated by the thought of that alone, in that moment, I change the context. I mean, and it doesn't have to be as drastic or aggressive as the things I mentioned. And I've done this with abstracts before, where I've just like, hey, you know what? I'm just pouring this one color all over it. And then for a second, whatever I do looks like absolute garbage most of the time for a couple seconds. It's like just whitewashing it, or just gessoing over it and then starting. It's kind of like that, but not, because you've got all these layers underneath. You can still see stuff. There's some texture. There's just the act of doing it in itself does something for me. And usually, like I said, it's an aggressive act. It's a very strong physical act of breaking or altering the canvas or board or paper or whatever it is in an act of frustration. That it changes the context of the whole piece. It's like, hey, this was supposed to be a piece about whatever. Well, now it's a piece about the fact that I couldn't express that thing. It's being frustrated with myself and being frustrated with trying to express something. Like, it's a push and pull. I feel like there's so many artists that must feel that, right? Like this in the moment. Like, that's how I chose to get over that feeling of failure. Because for me, maybe I just couldn't handle starting from scratch. And if it's an abstract piece that's failing, if you want to call it that, which doesn't happen that often for me anymore, but if it's not going the way I want it to, like, it's not like I had a vision for it to begin with. I didn't have that. It wasn't a specific aesthetic thing. Whereas if it was a portrait or a figure or a landscape or something, then it's much more specific. It's something that I drew out first. I needed to, whatever, I want to make it realistic and get proportions right and the values, and like, oh man, this nose doesn't look like a nose and it just ruins the whole face. And like, there's things that happen that have more of a plan, and I just changed the context. Now the piece is about how frustrated I was in trying to express that thing that I couldn't. And it seems like it would get redundant, but it never has for me. That's the thing. I would never say, oh, I made bad art and I'm just done with it, and this thing sucks, and I'm just going to put it on Facebook now. I'm just going to put it on Instagram. I'm going to call it done. Hey, if someone wants it, I guess they want it. And this thing sucks. Like, I've had things that have been personal work that are not commissions that I've been maybe, well, I would say that 90% satisfied. And I've been like, hey, I've put a lot of work into this landscape. It wasn't exactly what I wanted, but I really just can't spend, like, I'm over it. Like, there's a point where I get over it. And I'm like, someone will like this and they will find it acceptable. They won't see what I see because they didn't know my intention and purpose and my vision in trying to create it. And I think they will like it. That does not happen to me often. And it doesn't frustrate me to the point where I have to change the context of the piece and get frustrated with it to the point of aggression. But it's like 90%. If it's less than 90%, I think that I need to fix it somehow before I call it done. And to me, that still wouldn't have been bad. It just doesn't fall into that realm of calling it bad art or a bad piece. There's something needed to happen that didn't happen, and I ended up saying that I was okay with it. But that's the thing, everyone's line is different, but I mean, this quote, making bad art is better than making no art, I don't think it is. I think that, I've let myself, mostly with commissions, like I said, feel unsatisfied, yet I called the piece done and I've given it to somebody because they paid for it and they were very happy with it. But to me, that wasn't an exercise in bad art as much as it was, I don't know, that's the struggle for me. Like, trying to rationalize that is the struggle because it was not what I wanted, it was not great, whatever. Like, I mean, that's, making bad art is better than making no art. I don't know. Like I said, in personal circumstances, like, no, I feel like it would have been better to just not make, I don't know. I mean, but I was saying this with the commission before. I'm getting all over the place and tripped up here. That the only thing I learned from making what I would determine as bad art, so let's say it is a commission and it's bad, I don't like it, I'm completely unsatisfied with it, it falls below that 90% approval or whatever, all I learned is that I don't want to do that again. All I learned is that I need a clear vision. I need to be happy with it. I need to be happy with it because even if someone else is, at the end of the day, I feel like this thing, a commission I would get paid for. And at the end of the day, I'd be like, hey, but I don't like that piece. I don't like the fact my name's on it. I don't want it to represent me. It's not, like, I would rather, something, if I look back on something 10 years ago that I made, I'd be like, that's not that great, but it was a reflection of what I was satisfied with at the time. So it's a very honest thing that I attached my name to, and I'm okay with that. And I'm okay with people seeing it. They're like, oh man, like, wow, like, that's what you used to make. And be like, yeah, that's what I used to make, and this is what I make now, like, whatever. That doesn't really bother me. But this whole other thing of, like, currently, in the moment, being unsatisfied and putting it out there anyway, I just don't think that does any benefit. I mean, like I said, I think that if the piece is going sideways on you, then you either choose to start from scratch, which is just not my approach, or you change the context and alter the piece somehow. It doesn't have to go as far as physically, damaging things to create a new context, but it could be just like, hey, I was using this color palette, and now, it was all just, calm, whatever colors, and I'm throwing black on it. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to throw black on it. It's a flat, strong, bold thing. It's just going to be sumi ink, just boom, a splat. And I'm going to let it sit there and just see what happens now. Or something like that. Like, it could be like that. Everyone's got a different way of working it. But when I think of this thing, making bad art is better than making no art. I don't know. What do you get out of it at the end of the day? If you got something out of it, if you learned from it, like, I mean, you could sit here in the studio for 4 or 5 hours and create something, and you're like, it's done. And then a second later, you're like, man, it's not done. It's garbage. It's not, like, what? Why would it be done and still be bad? You could say, you know what? I'm starting again. And you go from scratch. And then you didn't make bad art. You didn't make any art. What you did was you tried, or you attempted to make art maybe, and you actually didn't complete it. You started again. And the next piece you can call a piece of art. It all depends on how you define the word bad. But I think I've I don't know if I've exhausted the topic, but as much as I want to talk about it, I have. So with that, I want to go on to the epilogue. And I'm answering a question that I got. It was quite some time ago that I got this question, so personage who asked the question, if you were listening, I hope you are, so you know that I actually addressed this. because I said that I would, and I am. They asked, what are some easy first opportunities to monetize indie art for emerging artists? Again, with terms, I don't know what you mean by indie art. I think, the rest of it seems clear. First, easy opportunities to monetize art for an emerging artist, so a new artist, someone that doesn't have, representation or an agent or, a dealer or whatever else to move their art for them. It's interesting to still think of myself as an emerging artist because I think I easily fit into that category, but I feel very confident in what I'm doing in a lot of ways, and in other ways completely not at all. When it comes to navigating what I would call the art world, or trying to sell work, or have an online presence that is more professional and whatever. Like, all that stuff takes research and expertise that I don't want to spend my time figuring out. Anyway, that's a little rant. But what are some easy first opportunities to monetize your art as an emerging artist? It depends on the kind of art you make, for one. But I think that approaching local businesses is something that I started doing, when I first started creating pieces. Some coffee shops or just certain stores that would sell certain things are more like small business owners, right? Like, you're not going to walk into a chain restaurant and be like, hey, would you sell my paintings here? That's probably not going to go over too well. Those people have a department, or a person that reaches out to artists a lot of the time, or they know someone that knows someone. That's somebody's job. And I'm thinking of places like the Keg. So the Keg Steakhouse and Bar, it's a chain, and I mean, they have original art in at least the ones that I've been in, and I've only been in 2 kegs ever. But I know in Lethbridge, beautiful, beautiful abstract color field pieces. And I tried, when I was there just as a guest, eating food, I had asked, hey, who's this artist? And how did they choose? I was really curious about that process. I didn't get many answers at the time, but I found out it was an artist from BC. They tried to get Canadian artists, but these were original works, right? But it wasn't like, I'm just going to approach the Keg and be like, yo, can you sell my art? You could try that, but I don't think it'd be very successful. I don't think it would be easy. I don't think it'd be a good move if it's one of your first opportunities. But I would say approach small, local, independent businesses in your area. Right now I've got work at a hair salon and I've got some work at a bookstore. The bookstore was an opportunity that they kind of offered me because I was just a faithful customer to this bookstore. I just love this bookstore. I love books. I love supporting local when I can and when it makes sense. And he's a genuinely nice guy who owns this bookstore that I was like, hey, I love this place. There's 2 local bookstores. I went to both, and then things happened and I frequented this one more. And either way, I would rather go there than go to Chapters and buy books there, or wherever else in the city you can buy new books. I prefer to buy these used books from there, and even if they were brand new, I'd buy them there anyway, just because it makes me feel better too to support local independent business by good people. But anyway, that opportunity he gave to me, whereas the hair salon, I knew someone who knew the owner. In the past, though, I had just gone blind. I didn't know anyone at the business. I went to some coffee shop and I was like, hey, I did that when I first moved to Lethbridge. They had a place called Esquire's Coffee. I approached them and I said, hey, is your manager or supervisor or whatever here? They said, no, but you can give her a call. I gave them a call. I said, hey, can I email you some of my work? I see you've got some empty space. Get to know your local businesses. See if they have space. Some places will already have local art up. And then okay, this is an invitation. I just need to get on a waiting list maybe. Maybe that's all it takes, because maybe they change it every month. Maybe they've just had that stuff up for 6 months and it's been basically abandoned there, and you can come and say, hey, I'd like to put some stuff up. And I find that that's a really good thing to do. And if there's nothing up and they've got a lot of empty space, then that's something you can say, hey, this would be maybe a mutually beneficial thing if I were to have my art here and you get to have decor here for free, and then you work out an arrangement for how people would pay for those works and how they would contact you, etc. And it doesn't take a lot of effort. I understand that some people might be really shy to do that and approach people, and I certainly fit into that category, but it was something I was just able to do. Other things are, establishing some social media. I find that going on buy and sell pages locally seems to do the trick some places. Some cities, Kijiji's a better fit. Other places like BC still uses, like, for some reason, Vancouver uses Craigslist a lot for stuff that in Saskatchewan we use Kijiji for a lot. And I'm finding that the buy and sell pages in Alberta are where I sell more art than, in Saskatchewan. That really wasn't the case. It was more on Kijiji that people were looking for art and that I was selling more there. So figuring out what media platforms in your area that you can take advantage of or use to, your advantage, what works better for that area, try those out. Because I find that it's, it doesn't take very long for me to post something like a Kijiji in Lethbridge, but I almost never do it because I've had like almost no success in doing that. Whereas on the buy and sell pages, I have way more success. So I would say that's an easy thing to do. Buy and sell pages as well. That's an opportunity for you to, if you're talking about monetizing your art, I mean like to sell your work. Other thing you can do that I don't do is create prints. Prints are something that some people get into. I've always been intimidated by just doing all the research and figuring out how do I even take a good photo of it? How do I find the right place that's going to be able to, like, can I get a huge scanner and somehow that will be great? Or do I have to take a photo with my phone? Like, that doesn't seem like it would be great as a print. Like, there's research you can do there. You can find printers. You can talk to people at the university, whatever. I mean, networking is a thing I'm horrible at. Absolutely horrible at. But it's something that if you could do, and finding a mentor or finding someone to help you with that. The last thing I can think of is trade shows, which, I mean, I talked about a little bit before in another episode, but I craft shows, trade shows, there's a lot of like local handmade like shows where you buy a table, you rent a table basically for the day, and you're there, you have a space, a physical space, and or there's festivals, outdoor festivals. In Saskatoon there was a bunch like that, and here there's that too. Like Saskatoon had oh man, I can't think of what it's called right now. On Broadway in the summer, Fringe Festival, went through, and they had vendors, local vendors there. I sold stuff there. In Saskatoon Pride, Lethbridge Pride Fest, the same thing. You can apply to be a vendor. All these things have various different, different rates of success and also different prices for tables. But just figure stuff out in your area. I would say go on to Facebook groups if there's local artist Facebook groups. You don't even have to ask people on there or ask around, but find a way to get local newsletters from, here we have an Allied Arts Council. In Saskatchewan, there's other things that you can sign up for newsletters, be aware of what's happening with galleries. Just find opportunities through there too, because I mean, if you want to exhibit work and sell work through an exhibition, there's a lot of opportunities for that, right? And you just need to sign up to some newsletters or certain organizations, get some information. But those are the things that I can think of right now. And those are the things that I do. I don't really reach outside of that in any way that I can think of right now. But those are, easy first opportunities. It just depends on who you are and what you call easy. Approaching a business might not be easy for you, but getting online and searching up opportunities through galleries might be. And then you just write up a proposal. You don't have to meet anyone in person. You send them pictures of your work. You give them, like an artist statement or something to work off of, and they're like, hey, I really think your work would resonate well in our gallery. We're available in a year, or we're available in 6 months, or whatever. There were places that, in Edmonton, there was a cafe I went into one time. I saw they had local artwork there. I didn't approach anyone in that moment. I emailed them later, and I was like, hey, I've noticed you got artwork here. How does that work? They told me, we rotate it every month, and you contact this person here, and then I ended up getting work up there. So, yeah, those are the things I can think of right now, opportunities to sell work as an emerging artist without anyone else, you being your own representation, you being your own kind of peddler of your merchandise, I guess. That's what comes to mind right now. Anyway, with that, that has been my artist life.